Well, good evening, and welcome to another edition of Understanding Our Times. I want to thank you for joining us tonight, and I want to thank everyone who has been a part of this so far. Anybody who has watched any of the videos, subscribed, or made any comments, and I want to continue to encourage your involvement, either by subscribing or commenting on the site or in person. We're about to get a storm out here tonight, so I'm hoping that the wind will not interfere with the audio. Maybe we'll have a few minutes to get something in. I wanted to continue tonight with worldviews. Worldviews are so important to everything else we're going to discuss. Understanding what a worldview is, what it's comprised of, what ideas it's made of, what assumptions are behind it. And from that point, we can really take a look at history, the different ages, where we've come from and where we are now, whether we're talking of ethics, of politics, of social issues, of any and everything, the individual, the relationship of the individual to the state, law, all of these things come from worldviews. And so I would like to just one more time repeat a few definitions of worldviews. And then I want to discuss about some of the ideas behind worldviews, some of the key fundamental ideas that are usually in philosophy called metaphysics. Now, I'm using the term metaphysics as it's used in philosophy. I'm using it more or less synonymously with the idea of a theory of reality. The word metaphysics came from whoever put Aristotle's writings together, and it is the group of writings that comes after his physics, metaphysics meaning after physics. It's taken on an entirely different meaning in our age. Shirley MacLaine, some of you may remember her, Out on Her Limb. A great actress, Shirley MacLaine, by the way. I think she's an Oscar-winning actress. But indeed, she went out on her limb, and she probably fell off of it, along with this entire generation, with all of her New Age writings. So metaphysics has taken on the meaning of all sorts of demons and spiritual things that are not physical, and they're just, there's no real coherent meaning of the term. It just means there are a lot of schools of metaphysics, but one thing it certainly is not is Christian. And that's one use of the term, and that's not how I'm using it. Metaphysics is a theory of reality, and also important. Well, metaphysics addresses the number one. Let's read this. We've read it before, but what is prime reality? What is prime reality? The really real. To this we may say God, the gods, or the material cosmos. So that's what metaphysics is. It's an answer to that question, what is real? What is the really real? It is the theory of reality. Now, and I also mentioned one of the most important of these worldview questions, I think, is how do we know anything at all? And that is, in philosophy, known as epistemology. How do we know? So you really kind of have to look at how you know before you can decide what you know. There are really two sides to the same coin. Number two of these questions says, what is the nature of external reality? That is the world around us. And here the answers could be whether we see the world as created or autonomous, chaotic or orderly, matter or spirit, whether it's objective or subjective. So these different pairs of opposites are what a metaphysics is made of, a theory of reality. Do we think of reality as something subjective and internal? Is that what's really real? Or is it the objective world? Is it both? If both, how do they work together? These are the questions metaphysics answers about the objectivity of the world, the subjectivity of the world. Is the world made of one thing? Is it made of two things? Is it many things? So these are kind of the nuts and bolts of a metaphysics. What about time and eternity? What about change and what's changeless? What in the world constantly changes and what is unchanging? These are metaphysical questions. And with that in mind, I've read you the definition, Sire's definition of a worldview, and it will not hurt to read it again before we go on to one other definition. Let me get glasses here. A worldview is a commitment, a fundamental orientation of the heart that can be expressed as a story or in a set of presuppositions or assumptions that may be true, partially true, or entirely false. That's the kicker. You have to really analyze your worldview to see if it's true or false, or partially true and partially false. And it is held consciously or subconsciously, consistently or inconsistently, and that's what I hope we will all be doing more of, is to make our worldview conscious. We all have subconscious beliefs we absorb from the culture, from the movies, and we think we figured these things out, or we came to these ideas on our own, but we did not. They came from our subconscious, and we absorbed them like a sponge through osmosis, through the culture and our times, because there is a worldview not only individually but of our times. We live under the influence of a specific worldview, and so it's either conscious or subconscious, and we hold them consistently or inconsistently. That's another thing. Some people don't think through their worldviews to see if they are consistent about the basic constitution of reality, and that provides the foundation on which we live and move and have our being, I might add. It provides the foundation of our political system, of our laws, of our moral and ethics. Now, moving right along, I wanted to read from you another definition from Huston Smith, who wrote a very interesting book, Beyond the Postmodern Mind. And he also wrote a good book on the religions of the world. So what is a worldview? Huston Smith's description in the opening words to Beyond the Postmodern Mind: quietly, irrevocably, something enormous has happened to Western humanity. Its outlook on life and the world has changed so radically that in the perspective of history, the 20th century and now the 21st century are likely to rank with the 4th century, which witnessed the triumph of Christianity, and the 17th, which signaled the dawn of modern science. As one of the very few that have instigated genuinely new epochs in human thought, in this change, which is still in process, we who write and read these words are playing a crucial but as yet not widely recognized part. The dominant assumptions of an age, color, the thoughts, beliefs, expectations, and images of the men and women who live within it. Being always with us, these assumptions usually passed unnoticed, like the pair of glasses which, because they are so often on the wearer's nose, simply stop being observed. But this does not mean they have no effect. Ultimately, assumptions which underlie our outlooks on life refract the world in ways that condition our art and our institutions, the kind of homes we live in, our sense of right and wrong, our criteria of success, and what we conceive to be our duty. Hold up. What we think it means to be a man or a woman, boy, isn't that true. How we worship our God, or whether indeed we have a God to worship. Thus far, the odyssey of Western people has carried them through three great configurations of such basic assumptions. The first constituted the Greco-Roman or classical outlook, which flourished up to the 4th century AD. With the triumph of Christianity in the Roman Empire, this Greco-Roman outlook was replaced by a Christian worldview, which proceeded to dominate Europe until the 17th century. The rise of modern science inaugurated a third important way of looking at things, a way that has come to be encapsulated in the phrase, the modern mind. So you see here, Smith's definition is very much like the one from Sire, that we have unconscious assumptions that guide us, that guide the entire culture, and he also does a good job of describing the revolution in Western thought, which I grew up in. All of us are living in it. I grew up in the 60s and saw that shift in modern thought and modernism through Friedrich Nietzsche And we're going to come back to Nietzsche because he's very instrumental in defining it. So that's two things to keep in mind. We are in a tremendous, earth-shaking, cataclysmic shift in our worldview, in our dominant assumptions. And it's one of the 3 or 4 times it's happened in the history of the West. And we will see how Pitirim Sorkin defines these same changes, pretty much the same divisions of history in his theories as we continue. I want to read now, going back to the idea of what are these dominant assumptions that define a worldview. I want to read a little book, a little part from Susan Langer, who wrote a book called The New Key in Philosophy, and she here is showing how these ideas, these new ideas, play out in philosophy. They play out in any discipline you can choose, in any part of science, in art, in politics, believe it or not, in architecture, in music, etc. And she's writing